Welcome to session 5 of our staff meetings, and today I want to talk about something that I think is a vital part of Christian leadership, and that is the leader and his or her perspective. Vision is vital in what we do. You know, where are you headed is a legitimate question. In fact, as a pastor, as a leader of the church, that's a legitimate question for others to be able to ask us. Where are you headed? You know, we all know that Proverbs 29 verse 18 says, where there's no vision, that word means spirit of conquest, no determination of where we're going and what's in the future. Where there's no vision, the people perish. That Hebrew word is often translated in the Old Testament, they go back. Remember when the children of Israel came out of Egypt and they were in the wilderness wandering and they got confused, they got disappointed, they got discouraged, they got troubled, and they said to Moses, we want to go back to Egypt. Same word is used there. It's also used of someone unkept, somebody who just doesn't take care of the hair's matted. Where there's no spirit of conquest, where there's no direction, where there's no vision of where we're going, the people just have no direction. They want to go back. They're unkept. They have no real dynamic about what they do. You know, I remember when I was a little boy, Disney World had not been built. Disneyland was out in California, the genius of Walt Disney, the great Walt Disney. And when Disney World was finally built down in Orlando, Florida, and dedicated, Walt Disney had died. And after the dedicatory service, somebody came up to Michael Vance, who was the creative genius behind Disney World, and said to Michael Vance, it's a shame Walt Disney couldn't have lived to see this. To which Vance quickly replied, Walt Disney did see this, and that's why we're here dedicating it today. Vision is vital. Where we're going, what we're doing, what the vision God has given us for the place where we are is vital. You remember Abraham? He was old. His wife was barren. They couldn't bear children. And yet God promised Abraham, you're going to be the seed of a great nation. In fact, God said, see the stars of the heavens? Your seed will be numbered as the stars of the heavens. How many times did Abraham go to bed at night, look out from the flap of his goat-haired Bedouin tent and see those stars and be reminded of the vision that God had given him? You know what I learned in decades of pastoring? People don't give themselves to needs. They give themselves to visions. You can talk about the needs all you want to. We need to do this. We need to pay off the debt. We've got these needs. We've got the... People don't give themselves to needs. People give themselves to visions. A vision of what God wants them to be. A vision that's so grand and glorious that unless God comes through, you're sunk. Every football coach before the game has a game plan. He has a vision of what he wants to accomplish. Everybody, every commander in the army of a platoon has a battle plan, a vision of where they're going. Vision is vital, and it ought to be above all in the church. And the leader ought to be the visionary leader of the church, to get your vision from God and build upon it. Now, when you get a vision from God, I'll tell you what vision will do in your church. And we talk about it in detail here in the Pastor's Guide in chapter 5. But a vision will do 5 things for your church. Number 1, here's the first thing it'll do. It'll bring definition. It will define your task. Some of us need to define the task of what we're doing, and a vision will do that. It will define who you are. Here at Guidestone, we have a vision statement. We have a vision of what God wants us to do, and it defines our task, and it's in a 1-sentence vision statement. It says, we say we exist to honor the Lord by being a lifelong partner with our participants in enhancing their financial security. That's our vision, and it defines what we do. And so that little vision statement becomes the lens through which we look at everything. Will what we're about to do here, will this new initiative, will it honor the Lord? Will it create this lifelong partnership with those pastors and missionaries and others we're serving? And will it ultimately enhance their financial security so they can get to a place of vocational retirement with some dignity and some security, be able to volunteer on missions? It defines our task. A vision will do that for you. It will bring definition to what you're doing. A second thing it'll do, it will bring design to your life and ministry. Now, what do I mean by that? How do you get a vision? Well, the same way you birth a baby, ironically. The birth of a vision and the birth of a baby are identical. Stage one, the first step is this, conception. In the birth of a baby, that's when the seed of a man connects with the egg of a woman and conception takes place. That's the way it happens with a vision. When the seed God gives you for that place of service where He's put you, where no one can do like you can do because you're an individual and He placed you there. And alone with Him, you conceive what God not just wants you in the church to be, but to do. It begins in conception. Then the second stage, gestation. And for 9 months, that lady gestates that baby as it grows in her. You know, the first few months, nobody sees any difference. And then all of a sudden, she starts to show, and the baby begins to grow inside her, and people begin to see she's pregnant. That's the way it ought to happen with a pastor and his vision. He ought to get his vision alone with God where it's conceived, and then gestate it for a while. Live with it for a while. Let it grow in you. Pray about it. Think about it. Dream about it. Research about it. Talk to some folks confidentially about it. Let it begin to grow in you. And you know what will happen? After a while, folks in that church will say, you know, something's different with that pastor. Something's growing in that pastor. I see something happening in that pastor. Conception, gestation. What's the third stage? Birth. That's when the baby's born. It's out, and it's a boy, it's a girl, and the celebration takes place. And the same is with a vision. When that vision that a pastor has conceived from God and gestated himself is birthed, and it's out before the people, and the people see the vision. Then comes the fourth stage. The fourth stage is vital. It's adoption. It happens with a baby. That baby that is born is adopted. And here is a couple that didn't personally conceive, much less gestate or birth that baby, and yet they adopt it. They take it, and by all legal rights, it's theirs, takes their name. That's what has to happen in the church. When the pastor conceives, gestates, births a vision, then the church begins to adopt it. And even though they didn't gestate it and birth it, they take it as though they did, and it becomes just as much theirs as the pastor. And this is what happens when the church adopts the vision. Then comes the next step. Now, in the growth of the steps of a child, the next step is growth. That's when the child begins to grow. You know what happens when a child grows? It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of money to grow a child. And so it does with the birth of a vision in a church. When it begins to grow, it costs money, it costs energy, it costs time. And then comes the next stage, maturity. I had 2 daughters. When everything I'd ever prayed for and hoped about in those daughters, I'd watched them, I would be birthed, they'd grow, and then there came the time when I walked them down the aisle and put them in the hand of another man. And everything I dreamed about them came to maturity. And you know, that's a dangerous time in the life of a church. When all of our vision, everything we dream for comes to maturity. And I've seen a lot of churches that died at that point because they never dreamed again. Because there's one other step, and that's reproduction. That's when we begin to reproduce into those other visions around us. And my kids have reproduced. Now I have grandkids. And that's the way it is with the church. As those visions that are grown and matured begin to reproduce into others around you. What will a vision do? It'll bring definition. It will bring design. Thirdly, it will bring direction. You have a vision, it'll bring direction. You know, where we're headed is a legitimate question. And once you have a vision and the church adopts it, you have a direction for where you're going. We have a strategic long-range plan and dream and vision here at Guidestone that takes us through our centennial year. We know how we're going strategically, and now we know how we're going to get there. It brings direction to what you're doing. A fourth thing a vision will do is this. It'll bring a dynamic. It'll bring a new dynamic to what you're doing. I've seen this in the church when a vision is birthed and adopted and begins to grow. It brings a new dynamic to the church, and people get on board and they're excited about seeing what God is doing and what God has promised to do in them. It brings this new dynamic to you. And there's a fifth thing it brings, and that's dependence. A vision ought to be so grand and glorious that we've received from God that it brings a new dependence on Him, to trust in Him, to be completely dependent upon Him. Unless He comes through, we're sunk. You know what? Some visions are stillborn. A pastor has them, they birth them out there, and then they just kind of fizzle. You know why? Because they don't gestate them. Same reason some children tragically are stillborn. They don't have a gestation period that's long enough. So get your vision from God, but be careful that you gestate it, that you pray over it, that you live with it, that you're sure it came from God. And people will begin to see you're pregnant with something, and then you can birth it for God's glory. You see, a vision without a task is just a dream. Well, most of us have been there. We've gone to some conference and got a vision of what we want to do, but didn't have any task to couple it with, and came home and it just fizzled out, and we never talked about it anymore. A task without a vision is drudgery. How many churches are involved in that? You know what you need to do. I need to do this on Monday night, this on Wednesday night, but no vision, no spirit of conquest, and so it just becomes drudgery. But a vision coupled with a task is the hope of the world. Get your vision from God. Make sure it comes from God, because where there's no vision, the people go back and perish. Keep a perspective of what you're doing. Where are we headed is a legitimate question. God wants you to be a visionary leader, and He wants to lead the way. God bless you. See you next time.